So a couple of years ago, I picked up a bunch of these aluminium channels. They have magnets at either end. I have a dozen or so, and I've used them for various things over the years. But I thought that they would be perfect for this project to create the frames that I want to use. So I modeled up this kind of interior channel shape in order to create a 3D model to create a bracket that would be a right angle. And then I modeled it and had it printed. And here is that bracket. So it's designed to be able to take, I don't know if you can see that very well, one rail slide all the way through and another create the angle. And once I was pretty happy that this was a good fit, I printed a bunch more. And now I have a load of these brackets. I could cut some of this channel to length and form up the first frame. And here we see what is going to be the lower frame of the Scissor-Lift. So the broad idea here is that this bottom frame will sit at the bottom of the laser, and then I'll make up another one exactly like it that will sit on top, and then we'll create some scissor arms that can be driven in and out via some kind of lead screw through the middle. Okay, we've made a bunch of parts and I'm going to talk through them as I reassemble this thing, but this is the basic kind of where we're going to for the sides. So we machined a bunch of these aluminium sets with just 8mm holes evenly spaced, and the magical machining part of this really was to make these. So this is a very flat, low profile back edge with an 8mm outer diameter and a 6mm thread all the way through. So what that means is I can use these to create these pivot pins. Just pop that through there, stick a washer on, pop that on there, put another washer, and then I can thread this shortened bolt in, tuck it down nice and tight. There we go, and that is our pivot. And the important thing there is this very low profile means that we don't have to have much clearance off the edge rail. So you can see that that whole kind of setup sits very close to the rail. So the next part of this that was I guess interesting to make, let's bring this forwards. So I'm using the same bolt that holds this bracket on to be the pivot arm, or I guess like the fixed arm for this. So another piece of magic, very similar to the main bracket, this time in Delrin. Again, fairly low profile disc, 8mm hole. This one is a 5mm thread all the way through. And what that means is I can pop that on there, thread this in place, and thread it through that hole and tight up against the nut right there. And this just provides me that pivot point. There's a little bit of flexibility on this side to be able to kind of shift it in and out just to get the alignment right, but this will hold it in place. And at the other end of this we have bearings. So these fit exactly inside this channel, or pretty close. And again, this piece was literally just an existing bolt that I flush cut, or just trimmed off what was the, I guess it was the crosshead on it, to make it, again, low profile so that it would fit in this channel nicely. And I can just drop that in like that. This is long side, or I say long side, closest to the rail and furthest from the rail is kind of the two aspects of this. And so you end up with a set of fairly shallow standoffs and a set of wider standoffs to account for that difference. Standoff set, so I have a one nylon washer which I kind of took the edges off, which just drops onto here and sort of avoids the sides of these channels, and then another nylon washer which inevitably I've thrown somewhere. So this basically mimics the same kind of standoff of the piece of Delrin that I put on the other side. Just drop onto there, and no, not that one, that's a lock nut. So I did want to use lock nuts on this side, but there's no way to grip the back to give yourself that kind of purchase. So the final piece of this is this lock nut, which I'm actually putting kind of the wrong way around, like the nylon insert first, because I want this to stay at a fairly specific place. And I guess the important thing is in order to create the cross rail, which we'll get to in a minute, I 3D printed these end points which fit exactly over these nylon lock nuts. So then we have a pair. So we're putting kind of the near side inside of the back, and these nuts near the front at the bottom. So then we have these front and back rails with these identical hole sets, and these are designed to fit like this. And they match up with this carriage and rails. Now I reclaimed this from a 3D printer that wasn't really working, which I made a video about a while ago, if you want to go and look at that. I took it to pieces and stole all the bits out of it. So I decided this was a good opportunity to reuse some, and this is one of the carriage pieces. I have kind of machined and modified this central piece to fit what I needed. We'll get to that a bit more in a minute, but these rails have a reduced diameter on one end and a shoulder, so they pop through just like that. And they are conveniently exactly 80 millimeters apart, which was very easy to figure out. Getting ahead of myself, because one of the things I need in this back rail before we tie things in is a bearing. So this is just going to be what the lead screw goes into, and it obviously needs to be in place before I capture it between these two things. Right, so and this will be the top rail. Right, so there we have those things all sat in place. Now this has a bunch of different holes in it. Now the reason it has a bunch of different holes in it is this is a small piece of angle aluminium that was part of a frame of an old TV that I also took to pieces, and it was a really old TV, an old plasma. It was massive and heavy, and it had this big aluminium plate that backed the plasma screen. And I took it apart and recovered the aluminium, and I cut bits off it that were useful. So a lot of these holes were part of that, but some of these holes are now designed to take exactly here. Unfortunately, this particular piece I wanted had a few holes on this side, so this is not a close fit, but we'll just have to work around that over those two nuts. So that's just ties those two sides together. That's exactly what we want. So now we are talking about lead screw. So this is just a piece of M10 threaded rod. At one point this formed part of my very first DIY CNC machine in pretty much this form. I cut it a little shorter at the moment, and this is an anti-backlash threaded nut, which is just a piece of Delrin with an M10 thread through it, which you can then kind of tweak with this bolt and this gap to try and take out the backlash. Not super important in this application, but I had it laying around, so that seemed like a good idea. Now of course what I'm going to need to do right now is take this off. I suppose I could just take, you know what, it's going to take me ages to take that off. So he comes in, this reduced diameter goes into that belt, that thing at the back, and this hole that I machined in this carriage fits pretty much exactly that Delrin kind of drive nut. I'm just leaving it sort of touched in place for now. So yeah, a lot of the machining I did on that carriage was to take out the kind of structures that existed for the 3D printer so that I could get this Delrin lock nut in line centrally with these rails. So now I should be able to drop this like that, and then this carriage I actually machined again a little recess here just so it can tuck underneath the kind of L of this L bracket. And then what I need to do is just sort of bind this to this so that they move as a single piece. Now, what I might do just for the temporary is just drop a couple of zip ties. So what I might also do is like glue or hot glue this join just to make sure that it's stable. But at this point, we should be somewhat mechanically bound. Now, of course, what you get now is that if you screw this, you just unscrew the thread from the back bearing, which is not what you want. So another piece we made, basically a little locking nut. So this is just a regular nut with a couple of holes drilled and tapped through the side for some grub screws. So he should thread on here nicely. Bearings. This is a larger bore bearing with a 10mm internal diameter, and then we should be able to drop this guy on the back so he fits over all of those things. So get you back to where I want you. Pop these retaining screws through there. We'll put some nuts on that in a second. So now somewhere I have tiny Allen keys, so we can just do up this lock nut and just make sure. So I gave myself 2 points on this, which should be plenty. Tighten that up. Right, so now that sort of this length of lead screw is kind of pinned in this space, and we should be able to actuate the Scissor-Lift just like that. So we just need to drop him in here. We'll go around and put the remaining bolts in to retain everything and get them all bolted up, and then I'll bring you back with this kind of final fit, and then we will have a look at it kind of going into place on the laser cutter. Nearly done. But there we go, it's all working beautifully. I did take the liberty of drilling and tapping a couple of holes from the top of the L of this cross slide into the carriage, just so we've got a proper mechanical connection there. The zip ties were fine, but there's a little bit of lag to them. So actuating it with a drill is a bit excessive really, but because in the machine I won't really be making that many motions. But let's take this over to the laser and get it fitted in place. I'll race you over there. Okay, so I already have cut a hole in the bottom of this laser for other reasons, for previous things, for the rotary axis. So I'm just going to slip this underneath and line up the top with the hole, and we should be there we go. So I'm going to switch you to this camera so you can kind of see what that looks like as we go in. In fact, let's try this. So there we see the hole cut through, and if I actuate this, just make sure that it clears the sides. Now I'm probably going to want to fix the base relative so that I can, there we go, so I can make sure it doesn't shift internally. Let's get the top for this. It has corners cut out because the old mechanism, I reused the posts of the original bed. We should be able to raise this up all the way. So the first thing I'm going to cut is a measuring stick to try and help me get a consistent depth. So I'll measure off the top of that just to help with the realignment. But that is the business. Alrighty, let's see what that looks like. So just a very quick cut. I've been meaning to do one of these for ages. I got the basic dimensions off of Thingiverse. Theory is you put this on the gantry and the laser, and this measures where the top of your material should be to get a good focus depth. Now, I obviously had a pretty good guess with this anyway, because 2 passes cut this cleanly, no problem. So now I'm going to do a test with a much thicker piece of material that definitely would not really even be cuttable on the K40 or the static bed, to see whether or not I can make some passes, 1 or 2 maybe, and then lift the bed and then do more passes and see whether they overlap precisely enough to give it more depth of cut. So let's grab a piece of material. So this is 8.5mm ply, definitely out of the K40's league in terms of being able to cut through. So I just need to come up with a simple little design, and we'll see whether or not we can get it to cut through. We'll use our gantry measurement to adjust this down. Experiment 1 failed, but it failed in an interesting way. I just cut the edge off, and I don't know if you can see this. Bring it in like that. We do have kind of burn cut, kind of pretty much all the way down, not completely cut through, but you can see on the back side indications that we were almost breaking through. So I am going to try this again. Okay, experiment 2, also kind of a failure. So 6 passes seems to be pretty much the limit of, that's basically 6 doing a 360 turn on the lead screw to raise the bed between passes. And I think something interesting happened in this. Let's look at the back. What do we see? What you can just about see, if I can make it focus on this, come on, is a pretty clean cut line on all of the surfaces in this orientation and none in this orientation. Now, what's the difference? Why one way and not the other? Well, I spent a bunch more time faffing around with this, and the answer is not as clear-cut as I would like. Well, you join me here at the end of this video, at the end of something of a voyage of discovery that this provoked, all in aid of trying to see how thick I could cut. I was not expecting to have that problem where it would cut fine in one direction and not the other. Eventually I ran that down to the fact that the laser head was not a true 90 from the gantry, or it was in one direction but not in the other. And what that meant was that, like, if you're not changing the height, it doesn't really matter. You kind of shoot at a slight angle, but whatever. But when you're lifting the material each time, if you're shooting at a slight angle, you're lifting a whole kind of swathe of new material into the path of the laser, so it never really gets a chance to kind of get any deeper. So I just fiddled around, changed the, I basically put a couple of washers on top of the standoffs of where the laser mounts at the front. And that has significantly improved the situation. Not perfect, but I have with, let's see, this was 7 passes, so 7 layer shift ups. It took a little bit of persuading out. There was a little bit, you know, maybe an 8th pass, maybe 8 on a nut, or even a 9 to catch these last little bits. But it was pretty even all the way around, so I will call that success. which is a nice note to leave a video on. And regardless of whether or not this experiment worked, it's way easier to adjust the height of the bed now for different thicknesses of staff. If I'm engraving bigger staff, so much better. So this has been a fantastic project. Really happy I've done it. It's been on the it's been on the back burner for a while as I ummed and ahed about exactly how to achieve it. So yeah, pretty pleased. And thank you for watching. If you made it all the way through to this part, then you probably are already subscribed and the kind of person that already likes my videos. So thank you very much. If you made it this far and you're not subscribed and you haven't hit the like button, I mean, they're right there. They're right there for you. But again, it's mostly for YouTube. Don't do it for me. Do it for YouTube. They love that stuff. Anyway, I've got a few more ideas for more laser things. I've got some prototypes I want to work on. I've got some stuff that I need to make for other tools, which of course is the entire ecosystem I live in. My wife makes fun of me for this, but honestly, I like that I have all these tools and I can use them to make improvements for or adjustments to each other in a beautiful closed ecosystem of me just mucking around in my workshop. If that sounds like your cup of tea, then, you know, subscribe, come back next video, we'll be making some more things. Thanks for watching, see you next time.